Good morning. Could you please um, provide your name? I'm seeing Setu, but I'm not sure. Good morning. Could you please um,
Hi, morning, Raymond. Can you hear me?
Good morning. Yes, I'm hearing you.
Okay. Wait, so is it that we're going to have a waiting room or you're going to
No, no, persons come in automatically.
maybe you should have, because isn't that like, if especially if it's on YouTube, you can't change it, no? Because from
Yes,
what
but
I heard,
a waiting room means that we have to keep letting in persons.
but I think not having a waiting room means that people can Zoom bomb us.
No, we don't have that happening.
Okay, that's all right, that's fine.
No, that doesn't not that what we hear on the that is a very rare occurrence that for some reason everybody assumes that people bomb people right left, but that doesn't happen very often.
Okay,
I've
fine.
had I've had hundreds of Zoom meetings and no such thing has happened.
I hear you.
We always seem to highlight the few instances when things go wrong. I guess if
So
we get
you,
very, very popular, then we'll have to worry about those things.
so you are going to automatically mute the setup so that they're
No,
automatically.
when persons log in, they're automatically muted.
Okay, that's yeah, okay. All right, that's fine.
Right. So we don't have to. I've tried to do it as limited maintenance as possible, since we don't really have a huge staff doing things. Ah, Tetu Monroe. Good morning. The person logged in as Galaxy A30s. Could you please change that to your correct name? Simply click on Galaxy. If you open the list of participants and click on Galaxy A30. Yes, I'm hearing you. Oh, yeah.
Morning, Raymond.
Good morning.
Um, Raymond, you can hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
All right. All right, Raymond, I just checking the mic with Kerry so we don't have feedback. We're in the same house.
Okay. Oh, that's why you had that feedback a while ago.
Yeah, but I close the door so it's gone now. You're not hearing it, right?
No, but there's a very strange thing. I had up the YouTube, and the YouTube was feeding back into the room, and so everything that was being said was repeating.
Yeah, it kind of sound for real.
I'm hoping I've solved that problem now.
Okay.
Sanil, are you on as Jamaica PQD?
Yes, I'm on as Jamaica's PQD. That's the registered name for the computer. Are you hearing me, Raymond?
Yes, we're hearing you fine.
Okay, no problem.
All right. Morning, everyone.
Good morning. Sorry, good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Dr. Miles Morgan.
Hi, Raymond. Are you hearing me? Morning.
Yes, I'm hearing you now. Excellent.
Hello.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, I'm hearing you clearly. I had to pull over on the road. There seems to be some traffic issues in Kingston here. So I've pulled over. So I'm using my tablet to join the meeting. I just want to tell you, this is one thing. I didn't bother.
Oh dear.
Yeah, so you will have to it's a good thing I sent you the with my presentation for me to go through. Because I'm using
Okay.
the tab. Yeah, but I'm not sure if I can. Let me see. Oh, all right. I just have to see if I can pull up the let me see if I can pull it up. You're about to start?
In about 5 minutes.
Hi, it's Debbie.
Oh, hi, Debbie.
Hey, we're just doing audio, right? Or are we doing video as well?
No, we're just doing audio.
Okay, just checking. Okay. How's the dust over in Kingston?
Well, you're seeing it on the hills, but it happens every year. I'm not sure I'm experiencing it worse than
Normal. Yeah, just
usual.
yeah, it's pretty cloudy or overcast.
It reminds me of when Riverton is on fire.
No, that would be way worse because you have the smell of all that and it's more toxic.
Yeah, well, definitely.
Way worse, way worse.
Hi, Joe. I see your hand. What's happening?
Oh, mosquitoes.
Sorry, Raymond, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
I've also asked the senior PQ officer as well as the pest risk manager. They have been the one dealing with the seed import to join me this morning. I hope you don't mind.
No, quite that's quite we're
Right.
welcome.
So there's a team from Planned Quarantine of 3 of us.
Okay, so those persons would be
Damian Rowe
okay.
and Latanya Richard.
Okay, morning, Latanya. I see you're on already.
Right.
So are you in a position to present now, Lisa? Dr. Miles Morgan, are you in a position to present? Have you?
You seem to have dropped off, Raymond.
Raymond's there. Everyone's just quiet.
It's 10 o'clock.
Well, it's 10 o'clock.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me?
I can.
Okay.
Yes, I can.
All right. So, well, since it's time, I'm going to start. So I'll just start with a brief introduction, and hopefully Raymond gets everything sorted out on the back end. So I'm Carrie Ann Bennett. I'm one of the directors of JOAM. I have responsibility for projects, and I'd like to welcome you all to our webinar today. So this webinar is part of what we hope will be a series of webinars on issues surrounding organic agriculture. All right, so just to give you a little bit about JOAM for those persons here who are not familiar. So JOAM stands for the Jamaica Organic Agriculture Movement. We're a volunteer-run nonprofit, and we have the mission of developing a sustainable and economically viable organic sector in Jamaica. All right, so we do that through lots of different activities. We provide training to farmers, technocrats, anybody who has an interest in wanting to learn more about organic. We carry out public education. We work with different schools. We work with community groups. We run different projects. So currently we have 2 projects in St. Thomas and Portland, where we're trying to help farmers to develop alternative livelihoods to deforestation. So a lot of the farmers there are heavily invested in honey and planting different tree crops in an organic way. All right, so if you would like to partner with us on any project, you can contact us. We can be contacted on our website. So our website is joamltd.org. So that is JOAMLTD.org. So you can find out more about our projects on our website. You can email any of us. You can call us if you get our phone numbers. We're always willing to help. And if you're interested in being a part of the movement, we would welcome your support. All right, so please, if you're interested, check out our website. All right, so today's series of presentations, we want to focus on organic seeds. So as farmers, you'll know that organic seeds, in order for you to maintain your farm as an organic farm according to the standards, your seeds have to be organic, or at least not commercial seeds. The commercial seeds, they are treated with different chemicals, and most of those chemicals are not suitable for organic production. So hopefully, and also because of the problem with the seeds, a lot of our farmers have issues interfacing with the government, because some of them who want to import seeds, some of our farmers don't quite understand why it is that, you know, the government is giving them so much hassle to import seeds. So hopefully from the presentations from Dr. Myers Morgan and Mrs. Wilson Graham, we're hoping that our farmers will understand more about why we have these regulations. And hopefully these representatives of the ministry will be able to understand some of the needs that our farmers have as it relates to seed importation. Another thing that we would like to address briefly here, because this topic is going to be too big for us to finish in one webinar, we want to talk a little about plant breeding methods that are applicable for organic farming. So this came out of a discussion that was going around with some of our members, and we realized that there is some misinformation about the types of breeding practices that are allowed in organic farming. And we also want to talk a little bit too about genetically modified organisms. What is the organic agriculture stance on this type of technology? So we hope to cover that as well. All right, so how we're going to proceed with the presentations, they are going to be for 15 minutes. And then we'll have a short 5 minutes or so question and answer session. When you want to ask a question, you can raise your hand. So currently now everybody's mic except mine is muted. So when it's time for you to ask a question, you can raise your hand. So if you click on the button to raise your hand, and you can be acknowledged, and then you'll get a chance to speak. If you don't feel like talking into your microphone, you can type your message as a question. So if it's a question, please use the word question for me to recognize through the chat that that is a question. If it's a comment, can you please write comment so that I can see what the comments are, and then we can talk about them in a discussion. All right, so I'll be monitoring the chat throughout so you can have the time. So while Raymond is getting things started, I'll just tell you a little about our speakers. So we're gonna have 4 main speakers today. So our first speaker is going to be Dr. Lisa Myers Morgan. Then we are going to have a presentation from our chair, Deborah Boyle. We're also going to have a presentation from Mrs. Stacey Marie Bennett Monroe. So she is going to talk in the capacity as...
Good morning, are you hearing me?
Yes, is this Dr. Myers Morgan?
Are you hearing me?
I'm hearing you. Yes, we can hear you. So, and we're also going to have a presentation by Mrs. Sunny Wilson Graham. And at the end...
Yes, it is. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes,
okay,
we can
great.
hear you. All right, well, since, are you ready to do your presentation now? Can you manage that right now?
Oh, I can start now?
Okay, let me just briefly...
Am I to begin?
All right, just
you're
give
breaking
me...
up.
Okay, all right. So please begin because I don't want you to lose. I don't want you to lose the signal. So since you're on the road, you could start.
Are we getting started?
Go ahead, Dr. Miles Morgan.
Are you hearing me now?
Yes, we are.
All right, thank you. All right. Good morning, everyone. I would like to share with you some interesting information with regards to how the government is seeking to create an enabling environment for organic seed production. Now, I'll be focusing on the organic seed market, organic seed quality, looking at some considerations for local organic seed production systems. What are the policies that the government has been implementing or seeking to put in place to create an enabling environment, and the status of commercial production of genetically engineered crops in Jamaica. So as an introduction, next slide. Jamaica, and by extension the Caribbean, can really benefit from introducing sustainable agricultural practices that will generate better social and environmental benefits. However, it is recognized that there is a technology gap to support a sustainable agriculture sector. Such is the case of seed production and supply. The need and the desire for know-how management and the disbursement of local seeds and the lesser dependence on imported foreign source seeds is actually increasing. Therefore, more research and development is needed to establish the market potential for an indigenous seed industry in the region, especially for organic agriculture. We have realized that in the production of organic seed, it will require experience and special skill sets. Organic seed systems, like all seed systems, involves the essential practices of breeding, production, and distribution. The quantity and quality of organic seed delivered to farmers is the result of many stakeholders working together. These stakeholders would include plant breeders and other agricultural researchers, organic certifiers, seed companies, policy advocates, organic food companies, and the farms planting organic seed, etc. It must be borne in mind that no single stakeholder group can address the diverse seed needs of organic farmers alone. Actions must be guided by shared values. The progress is even faster when it's more coordinated and sustainable. As it relates to the organic seed market, based on some literature research that I had conducted, it indicates that there is a substantial involvement of multi and bilateral aid projects in the organized seed sector in developing countries. You can see here that the FAO the World Bank, and USAID actually has invested a lot of money in the development of seed sectors in certain countries. And if you look at the years of their involvement, all of this actually led up prior to the introduction of improved seed within the seed sectors. The next slide shows a pie chart showing the organic seed market and the revenue share by percentage globally. And this data is as of 2019, and the source is Mordor Intelligence. They did a survey of organic growers, and they obtained this information where it shows that the majority of the organic seed share is actually in vegetable seeds, followed by field crop seeds, other types of crop seeds, and lastly, fruit and nut seeds. In the next slide, you can clearly see the organic seed market based on size by region as of 2019. So you can see that the organic seed market is largest in the North American continent, and medium in Europe, and very low in terms of take-up in terms of South America and Africa. It has been reported by Mordor Intelligence that most organic farmers still rely, though, on conventional seed for at least part of their operation. But why is this so? This is as a result of specific varieties that are unavailable in an organic form, or insufficient quantities in seed, and a lack of desirable traits. Although price is not an allowable reason for not sourcing organic seed under the organic standards, it remains an important reason for some organic farmers. This next slide shows the organic seed market statistics and projections for 2024 based on a global industry report that I was able to access at joaminsights.com. And you can see there information on the predominant companies that are into the production of organic seed, based on what their definition of that is, and the segments which are covered in terms of the crop distribution channels and various regions, and of course the various countries which are involved in global seed production. Now, another point of interest in terms of developing organic seed systems is the quality. In the US, the US universities and organic seed companies there have been working with genetically diverse, open pollinated plant populations, I guess you're all aware of that, as well as hybrids to breed varieties with multiple traits conferring what we call horizontal resistance, which are more ideally suited to organic production. If you're aware, some of the planting material available are what we would call, having vertical resistance, in that they're only resistant or tolerant to one particular, or have genes which are very specific to a particular organism, whereas if for horizontal resistance, you have multiple genes, or in our case, biodiversity at play in terms of mitigating against any negative impacts due to probably pests and diseases, etc. The American Seed Testing Association favors a system of testing organic seed to certify that it is GMO-free before it can actually be planted or sold. And this is a big problem for on-farm seed producers in the US, in that certain crops with what we call GMO analogs already exhibit pervasive low-level GMO contamination within that country. Commercial scale organic production requires seed stocks, both open pollinated and hybrid, with proven reliability, especially for natural resistance to insects and diseases, natural vigor to germinate promptly and outcompete the weeds, good flavor and quality, of course. Some considerations that we have to bear in mind when developing a local organic seed system. There is need for a public participatory model for breeding organic seeds, This model should aim to strike a middle ground between the inexperience of seed-saving farmers and any special interest bias in formal research. Some of the challenges that farmers will face, they may lack the skill sets to select traits important for enhancing organic production, and they may also lack resources to carry out multi-year development of said seed lines. Hence, leaving the research agenda in the hands of institutions simply accelerates the movement towards genomics and patentable outcomes. So there is a need for farmer-driven participatory breeding programs for the organic varieties. Or you're going to fall into the same problem where one company ends up owning all the intellectual property rights for such material. It is advised that commercial farmers go back every few years, however, to a reliable source of organic seed of their preferred variety. This practice guards against disease buildup, inadvertent contamination of the stock, and reversion of the crop to undesirable traits. This reliable source can be certified seed from a conservator, university, a public research institution, or a commercial seed company engaged in the production of organic seed. Of interest is that the geography of organic seed production can have some ramifications, mainly in the context of GMOs. For example, in Europe, Spain and Italy raise seed for the rest of that continent. And of importance would be the relative severity of pest and disease pressures, which is a major consideration in the production of quality organic seed. Now, how is the government of Jamaica creating or has been seeking to create an enabling environment? Well, we have the National Seed Policy and Action Plan, which was tabled as a white paper. The vision is establish a sustainable seed system, reliable supply of clean, support of agriculture production, productivity, food security, and biodiversity. Quite a mouthful. Of a vision. Of course, stakeholders are part of the Seed Policy and Action Plan was considered approved by Cabinet in October 2016 as a green paper. And in September of 2018, it was tabled as in Parliament as a green paper. And I think in 2019, I was asked to present to Cabinet for consideration as a white paper. Now, this policy seeks to address these critical areas for support: research, plant breeding, varietal evaluations, seed multiplication, processing, storage, quality control, marketing, etc. These areas are constrained, however, by inadequate human resources for those key skill sets which are needed, lack of funding for systems development for seed production or distribution, and of course, technology innovation. The policy covers both conventional and organic production systems. So if you were to review this document, you would not find any specific reference to strategies for organic approach to seed production, which is applicable to both conventional and organic systems. The policy makes provision for the implementation of an appropriate institutional framework, the building of technical capacity, financing strategy, and a communications program. So the key goals are to facilitate the development, introduction, and conservation of plant varieties with desirable traits that can address climate resilience, increased availability and access to clean seed to meet production requirements, improved regulations and monitoring standards to ensure adherence to quality, improved sustainable marketing and distribution of seeds, and of course, the protection of national plant genetic resources. The next two slides shows, well, a diagram that I am somewhat put together, giving an example or proposed structure or framework for the seed system. It will take some time for us to go through, but the presentation will be made available to you for you to go through in detail. But the key components would be seed legislation, the agriculture support, seed multiplication, ensuring that the macroeconomic policies are in place, seed processing, seed storage, all of that relating to quality control, and all parts of the seed chain, seed marketing, packaging, what sort of agriculture services that will be needed, extension, farmer credit, etc. Notice here, I mean, fertilizer, well, in terms of, as I said, it's a generic plan and can be adapted specifically for the organic system. Of course, the agriculture policies that must be in place to support this chain. Farmer uptake, of course, and you have different size farmers. And the cropping system and marketing situation. Of course, the cropping system, in our case, would be the organic system. Now, the institutional considerations stated, of course, MICAF, right, with responsibility for the implementation of said policy and plan. There is to be the introduction or formation of a national seed committee, an advisory body responsible for oversight and coordination, a varietal release committee, a subcommittee of the NSC, plant quarantine produce inspection branch responsible for seed certification, and of course the research and development division responsible for technical and policy advice with the implementation of the Protection of Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture Act, which since I think it was the end of last year that we are now mandated to provide that support and advice for this act. Legislative considerations, of course, would involve the development of seed legislation, lend support to the seed industry and to protect plant breeders' rights or organic plant breeders' rights. The legislation is to support reliable standards of seed quality, protect seed suppliers and users, and foster a quality-oriented seed industry. The plant variety protection legislation is to be subsumed under this national seed legislation. So the implementation involves the seed action plan, which outlines that framework of activities that will be critical in implementing a policy, and that can be accessed from the document itself. The implementation is projected over a period of 10 years at a projected cost of $214.4 million. And of course, these details are captured in said policy document. Now, the other policies that are pertinent to organic seed production includes the National Organic Policy, which is, well, according to the investigation, is still a draft. And the policy speaks to the establishment of a national organic seed bank by government in collaboration with relevant stakeholders. Now, the Research and Development Division recently benefited from an expansion of our seed storage facilities at the Bodles Research Station. And it is in that capacity that we will be able to provide any organic in country, and we will be in a position to provide that protection for this material for the organic community. Priority will be given to the main crops cultivated by organic farmers and other selected crops that have market assistance will be provided to a group of farmers to establish the government facility, which will foundation seed, foundation material, and breeders material as well. so that we sort of spread out in terms of where the seed is being held and protected, in that it's not all in one place, but it is properly managed. Now, the biosafety policy, which is of interest to organic growers, basically speaks to, well, in terms of our compliance or ensuring the implementation of our obligations under the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety, which Jamaica did ratify in September 2012, and it came into force in December of that same year. However, that draft policy has not been approved by Parliament, and those regulations were sent there from 2009 and are still in draft submission stage, which may warrant lobbying to get this policy actually in place and the requisite regulations enacted. So it is currently in the third draft and will direct the national biotechnology and biosafety regulations. It should be noted that the draft national biosafety policy explicitly states the need for mandatory labeling of products of modern biotechnology. And I've given you the link to the full text document for your information. So the biotechnology policy is another policy which has implications in terms of the whole issue of organic seed production. This policy is also still in draft, pending action by the Jamaican cabinet. It is not clear when or if further action will be forthcoming. The vision of Jamaica's biotechnology policy, as stated in the draft, is to utilize the best technological methods to improve the way of life of its people. So basically, those are the policies that are currently, that have been developed. The seed policy nearer to finalization than the others, but the others also need to be in place to provide the requisite support to that enabling environment if we are to proceed in developing said organic seed production systems or an industry. Now, I was also asked to comment on the status of commercial production. Notice I use the word commercial production of genetically engineered crops, genetically modified organisms, in this case, crops in Jamaica, right? And in Jamaica, there's currently no approved commercial production of genetically engineered crops. Jamaica currently still does not have a biotechnology or biosafety legal framework for the deregulation of commercialization of biotechnology crops, and does not have specific requirements for GE imports. Well, Ms. Wilson will speak to that in more detail. There are current regulations, however, that govern the importation of GE products for experimental purposes, such as field testing, for cultivation. When I was the focus of developing regulations for the, I guess, the risk management associated with the introduction of, at that time, of a papaya variety that was genetically modified for resistance to papaya ring spot virus. So there were several steps that were part of that process in terms of containment, evaluation, containment at different levels, at the laboratory, the greenhouse level, contained field trials, and we went through a series of processes and evaluations based on data collected from those investigations over that period. However, the actual product was never commercialized based on concerns that growers, papaya growers had who had their export markets in the EU, which, as you know, EU well, it's primarily anti-GMO, and the concern about outcrossing with those varieties, local varieties of papaya, with and being contaminated with genetic material from these genetically engineered papaya lines. So that work, I know, still continues, not in the field, but there are other lines, I believe, that are being looked at. But until Jamaica has in place biosafety policy and the associated regulations, and of course, the supporting organic policy, etc., only then can we really be in any position to assess the risks associated. But it doesn't stop us from now putting in systems for that. Now, there are regulations governing the importation, as I said before, of these products for experimental purposes in commercial release into prohibited in Jamaica. That's what the law, I mean, that's what I'm aware of. However, there is no regulation, however, governing the importation of GE foods for food or feed. Now, the issue of labeling, I mean, if we're importing from the US, you know, the US issue of labeling, they are not supportive of labeling. And and some of these products can be imported into Jamaica without restriction because there's no labeling to say that the processed foods that we are eating, cornflakes, etc., if the source of origin are really GMO. But as we know, in the US, more than 50% of the corn there is genetically modified, and I think canola and some other crops, which I will come to in a while. So most of the bulk commodities, including corn, soybean in particular, are imported and come mainly from the US, United States, and Brazil, where GE crops are grown, right? So since there is currently no list of approved or registered plant crops for import or cultivation, Jamaica also does not monitor or test imports for GE traits. Let me just say the government of Jamaica, which once that biosafety policy is finalized and enacted, then we will see these mechanisms becoming part of that process for monitoring. I have included a website here where, for your interest, the International Service for the Acquisition of Agribiotech Applications. If you go to this website, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with it, you can obtain as much information as you want on those crops that have been genetically modified, or should I say have been approved for commercial cultivation, the countries within which they are actually grown, all of that information, and the trait or the event that was introduced into the genome, and the trait for which they were bred, in terms if it's for resistance, if it's for protection from herbicide use. All of this information you can obtain from this website to inform you. If you look at this table, is the listing is somewhat fine, but you can have an idea of the crops where investment or money has been invested in doing genetic engineering: alfalfa, apple, canola, beans, even I think Irish potato as well. Irish potato, melon, so, soybean, as we said before, beet, sugar cane is a new one, sweet pepper, tobacco, tomato, and of course wheat, right? So if you look at the commodities that have been in which genetically, well, in terms of being genetically engineered, if you look at what we consume locally, you can have an idea with regards to what type of exposure. And we know our papayas, we have no genetically engineered papayas that have been released into the environment. The potato needs further follow up, right? There's one variety that if you check the listing, the name is linked to one variety here, but we need to ascertain whether or not if it is the non-GMO or the one that, it depends where you have sourced it, right? If it's from Canada, most likely it could be genetically modified. But the majority of what we consume, if you look at that compared to the investment in the crops here, you realize at this time, Jamaica is in a better stead and not at any high risk at this time, but we need to ensure that the requisite regulations are in place in the event. I've included here in the next slide genetic traits expressed in GMOs, particularly in the US, to give you some more information, right? There's potato there, and the genetic traits that have been enhanced. And I know that someone else, there's another speaker who will be speaking to the whole thing of breeding, but there is something that we need to discuss in terms of the assessment of the process, or is it the final product of the process? But that's a conversation now anyway, right? So basically that's what I have to share with you today. I hope it has been informative and may help in answering some questions. And this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. So any questions?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Myers Morgan. So remember, so because of the technical difficulties, we never got to give her a formal introduction. So Dr. Myers Morgan is the Principal Research Director for the Research and Development Division of the Ministry of Industry, Commerce, Agriculture, and Fisheries. So she has lots of experience in actually the research arm of these issues, as well as technical expertise on the policies. So remember, if you have any questions, you can raise your hand or you can leave a comment in the chat. So Deborah Boyle is saying that it was a very good presentation. Yes, we'd all agree because there's lots of things that we have learned. So Deborah doesn't have a question so much as a comment. So she's saying that she has a feeling that there's GMO in the feed that Jamaica is importing. So what are your thoughts on that, Dr. Myers Morgan?
Well, my thoughts on that is that it is a good probability that it is, based on the fact where the source of the inputs for the feed is coming from. However, for us to, in terms of verifying or confirming, we would need to have those systems in place where we can actually test for the event to see if it is actually in the product. But these are processed materials. So we will have to ensure that we have the right technologies to be able to detect and to verify whether or not these events have been passed on into the final product of the process. And I know it's going to be very important for persons who are into, we're doing organic livestock production. I know that for now, for those who are doing conventional methods, I don't believe it is, well, but let me not put it that way. I have not heard where they have expressed a concern, because this information about the feed being primarily having the source coming from GMO interventions, it is common knowledge, I guess. I'm trying to be diplomatic, but the thing is that unless we we have done testing, then we can say yes, but based on the fact that the source, it depends on the source of the feed inputs. So if it is that we are importing our inputs from from North America, then it's highly probable that it is in the feed, right?
Okay, so there's one other comment from Michael Allen. So his comment is that, to his knowledge, all corn coming from the US has GMO. So is that something, so is it, so are you familiar with the corn market in the US? Is it that most of the corn or all of the corn is genetically engineered?
Unless the corn.
Well, it's not 100%, unless, yes. Unless it is stated that it's GMO free, all corn coming from the US. Well, the issue is if it's not labeled, right, there's no labeling, then the assumption is that I think about more than 65% of the corn in the US is GMO, and the GMO corn are primarily produced for processing. So if you're aware of what the end products are from the processed material, which includes feed, then there is, as I said, a high probability that that source could be GMO. But unless we do testing, we can confirm, but based on the knowledge that we do have, then it is highly probable. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So someone asked if they could make a comment. So I'm gonna unmute your mic, and everyone else who has their mic on. So whenever that person is speaking, just mute your mic or we'll get a feedback. So I think it was Michael who wanted to say something.
Yeah, oh, is there feedback somewhere? Okay. When it comes to the aspect of GMO, here in Canada, for example, and the fact that we deal with my certification here, which we have to do our seed traceability, there is no commercial farm in Canada or the United States that their corn is not GMO and their main feed is not GMO. It's because of the disease aspect and because of the mass quantity in which they grow here, especially if you're going out in Saskatchewan, for example, Manitoba and Saskatchewan being the main and southern portion of Ontario, but Manitoba and Saskatchewan, all their corns are GMO, and usually the corn stock that is not GMO is usually by other small private farms, or the stock is also being infected by wind traces, which then puts their corn into problems. So the chances of having, okay, is a lot higher than the 60%. The chances of having corn coming out, especially because how cheap it is and the way they got a mass put it out there. I mean, Jamaica is hard to actually visualize 1,000 acres of one product, and yet it's not even a percentage of the land mass available in Canada. So that is normal for us to see in Manitoba, 1,000, 2,000 acres owned by one farmer. And there's hundreds of farmers like him putting out these things. The only way they're able to sustain that level of corn without the disease and the issue of watering and the issue of weeding, it has to be GMO. There's no other way. So any mass product coming out, the largest grain elevator, I had the fortune of working on a grain ship when I was 16 years old out here. All of that's coming into Thunder Bay, moves through Thunder Bay to come through the locks, go through the St. Lawrence Sea. Everything put out from that side of it, I will guarantee you it is GMO. It will be the smaller farmers that may have 50, 60 acres that may do non-GMO. And even then, most of their stuff is such demand in Canada that they don't even ship it out, because the volume is just not there for them to ship out. So that always has to be a concern when it's coming out of Canada, the United States, and coming out of Brazil, because Brazil right now is one of the biggest exporter of GMO products as well too. So It's just to be very cautious, to be on the safe side when it comes to that sort of.
Yes, yes. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Michael, for sharing that. I I did say that based on the acreage, well, not that the percentage of land area committed would be more than 65% in terms of GMO, and that any commercial production for feed that is predominantly GMO corn, for example, that goes into that for feed, right? So I agree with you in terms of that. In terms of the outcrossing, I did mention in the presentation also that that was a big concern for farmers who are growing non-GMO crops, because they are already detecting contaminations based on the large air eruptions. I agree with you on that, Michael.
Okay, so one last question before you go. You mentioned the proposed National Seed Committee, and I think someone also in the chat is asking about, could you tell us a little more about that? Like, who do you propose to be people that will be represented on the National Seed Committee? So my interest though is that would there be room for organic representatives on the National Seed Committee?
Well, that would be a given. that would be a given. I guess the permanent secretary and the minister would facilitate the stakeholder involvement. So all stakeholders, including the organic growers association, organic agricultural farmers, would obviously have to be on that committee based on the policies. The policy instruments that have been developed all speak to the role and involvement of organic agriculture. So therefore it is expected, yes, that groups such as yours and others who are engaged in organic farming will be part of, or organic agriculture will be part of that committee. You must have representation. Yes. Does that answer your question?
All right, yes, it does. So thank you so much for taking the time out, because I know that
there's a, sorry, there's a statement from Dorian about there are no GMO potatoes on the market in Canada. She has indicated a small amount of GM potatoes from the company Simplot are grown in Canada. Yes, Simplot has been doing a lot of work on GM potatoes. When you go through that database that I included in the presentation, you can gather more information, read the stage with which they're at, whether or not they are still at the experimental stage or nearing approval. Not Simplot in particular, but other research bodies or that are involved in that potatoes, right? But there are, if you check the database, you will see that there are certain events that have been incorporated in several varieties. But we, as Dorian has stated, that we need to distinguish whether or not they are at the commercial stage, meaning approval for planting and for consumption, or they are still experimental. And in some of these trials or investigations, they're successful, then it's just a release unless there is such material. So I just wanted to highlight Doran's comments. Okay. Yes.
Well, that's fine. And so thank you so much, because I know that you have a meeting that you were scheduled for the same time as this one. So thank you for
Yes.
taking the time out to be with us. You know, it was a very interesting conversation. We have learned a lot because I have some training in this field, but I did not know some of the things that you spoke about. So thank you so much for coming out and sharing with us. And I hope you have a good day. All right.
Thank you. It was my pleasure to be able to contribute, some additional information. And I pray that based on what I have shared, that JOAM and its members will continue to follow up in terms of in the sources that I've highlighted in the presentation, and to glean any additional information that can inform the way forward in terms of organic seed production systems. And the government, but let me speak for research and development. And I mean, we're seeking to see how best we can partner to facilitate this sector as well. So God bless and the rest of it till we meet again.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay. So our next speaker is Mrs. Stacey Marie Monroe Bennett. Bennett Monroe, sorry. She's my sister, so in my head, she's always going to be Bennett. So she's going to talk to us on the overview of plant breathing methods. So Mrs. Bennett Monroe is a lecturer at the University of Technology in microbiology, molecular biology, and genetics. She has training in molecular virology. She's a certified organic farming inspector. She was trained by the International Organic Inspectors Association. She's also a trainer and a consultant for persons who are interested in transitioning from conventional agriculture to organic agriculture. And she has been a longtime member of JOAM and has served for many years as the chair of the certification committee. And she has also helped to develop the draft organic policy as well as the Caribbean. And she has also served in different groups in the Caribbean to help other Caribbean countries develop their organic policies. All right, so remember, we're going to have a 15-minute presentation and we're going to have 5 minutes question and answer session at the end. So over to you, Mrs. Bennett Monroe.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thanks for being a part of our seminar, and thanks to JOAM for putting this seminar together. All right, I'm going to talk about the comparison of traditional and modern plant breeding techniques and their role in organic systems. And specifically, I'm going to talk about hybrid seeds versus genetically modified seeds. All right, so plant breeding is the improvement of the characteristics of plants so that humanity can be benefited. There are three classifications of plant breeding techniques. You have classical plant breeding techniques, new plant breeding technologies. We're not going to touch too much on these today because there isn't enough time. And the third one is recombinant DNA technology or genetically modified organisms. All right, I'm gonna get my pen. Before we go into the details of the presentation, there are some concepts I want to explain a little bit further. DNA and genes. So DNA is a chemical called deoxyribonucleic acid, and it carries genetic information from one generation to the next. So this is what parents pass on to their offspring. DNA carries information in a coded form, and this code is called the genetic code. So the information that governs how an organism survives is encoded into genes. This code is the same for all organisms. So I want everybody to remember this point. If you're a bacterium, if you're a dog, if you're a human being, the code is the same. So characteristics that are governed by genes include appearance, and most people are more familiar with this. So you look like your mother, you look like your siblings, how your organs function, how you respond to the environment, and your behavior. Now, genes exist in two forms. You have dominant forms and you have recessive forms. And again, please remember this, but we're going to touch on it later on. Now, most of the DNA that an organism has is in its nucleus. More complex organisms like our cells. For bacteria, it's in the cytoplasm or just in the cell body itself. I have here a diagram showing a human being and the cells that comprise human beings. Every portion of your body comprises cells. So we have a larger cell here, and this is the nucleus of the cell. And in the nucleus of your cells, you have chromosomes. Now you get a copy from your mother and you get a copy from your father. So we end up with 2 copies of each chromosomes that we have. So humans have 46 chromosomes. Now the chromosomes are just DNA coiled up. So long strings of DNA coiled up. And on your DNA, you have your genes, which are the codes that we spoke about earlier. Now for breeding, you have a classical or selective breeding. And this has been done for many, many years. From mankind started to settle and have communities, we have been breeding. We have been doing selective breeding. Selective breeding involves finding traits that you're interested in and working on these traits, growing these plants, getting the seeds, growing them for another generation, going through the fields again, and picking out the ones that you like. And what you like depends on where you are in the world. So it could be drought tolerance or just the size of the fruit. So desirable traits are collected. Now, desirable traits come up in populations because of spontaneous changes in the genes. So the genes change based on some selection pressure from the environment sometimes, or the genes just in normal cellular activity, sometimes your genes change. So these changes are called mutations. And selective breeding that we've been doing over the years has resulted in domestication of many crops that we know and animals that we know. And as I said, it's a very, very long process. So domestication is an evolutionary process because you have changes in the genes over time, and that results in cultivars for plants, varieties for plants or animals that have favorable characteristics for human beings. Now, the best example of domestication is with dogs. Now, every little dog you've seen out there, as cute as they are, as cuddly as they are, they came from a wolf. Now, a wolf is not cute and cuddly, but because of selective breeding, we now have cute and cuddly pups. Now, it took 14,000 years to breed out those traits that exist in wolves, so we have dogs that can live with us. Now, for crops, it's the same thing for crops. For crops, the wild type, that's the term we use for the naturally occurring variety. The wild types, here we have the wild type for corn is markedly different from the corn that we grow. This is a wild type for tomatoes, and this is a cultivated variety. And you realize that there are stark differences. And interestingly, for cabbage, every part of the cabbage, the Brassica family, that wild type organism, Brassica oleracea, has been changed to suit us. So we have the terminal buds for cabbages, the flower buds we have for cauliflower, we have the leaves for kale. So most of the crops that we have now, they didn't exist hundreds or thousands of years ago. We have been changing them over time. Now, the issue of agriculture, we started to domesticate crops 12,000 years ago. Egypt has been doing this for 5,000 years. In West Africa, in 3000, 1000 BC, we have where the cultivation of millet started, and the Maya civilization has been doing corn cultivation for 4,500 years. So it's not a new technology. Now, what is selected for? There are favorable traits that are looked for, as I said earlier. So some of these include the yield. So this crop now gives you increased yield. So the seeds are bigger, there are more seeds. You have seeds that the pods don't burst. So it doesn't make any sense. You have wheat and then when it's matured, it bursts and it falls on the ground and you have to go picking that up. We have seedless grapes, melons, cucumbers. There's flavor changes that we want. There is uniformity in maturity and ripening. This is very important for large-scale agricultural systems. You want all your crops to mature at the same time. You want them to ripen at the same time. This makes it a lot cheaper and easier to handle these crops. And toxicity also is a trait that has been bred out of some crops, and almonds is that example. Now we have here a map showing you the different plant and animal varieties and where they originated. And of interest in our part of the world, we have maize, we have dogs, we have beans. In Africa, we have millet, as I stated before, we have pigs, we have rice, and we have yams. Now, because we have been able to do classical breeding, we have really changed the face of agriculture. We have been able to increase productivity and crop yield. We have developed hybrids, and I'll talk about those later. We have developed plants that are disease resistant, pest resistant, drought tolerant, and we've also been able to increase the amount of food that is available for consumption, to the point where in 60 years, we have moved the index of hunger from 50% to 11%. However, even though we have done that, there are still grievous problems existing with respect to distribution of food around the world. So developed countries and far less developed countries, like the countries in Africa, as shown as red here, have extreme conditions when it comes on to food availability for people. Now we know that is as a result of the fact that the more industrialized countries of the world have been using a lot more than it's fair. We have to call a spade a spade. Now we're going to go into the concept of hybrids. Now hybrids exist naturally. Hybrids will exist in organic systems. Farmers like hybrids. Some farmers go ahead and they do their own hybridization. So when you do a hybridization, you cross two plant lines, and plant lines here means two plants of the same species, the same variety, or the same cultivar. But these plants have distinctly different characteristics. So these are, we're going back again to the traits that we're selecting for those traits that we find interesting. So you'll find plants that have distinctly different characteristics you would want in one plant, and you allow those organisms to breed or mate. Now, for hybrids that are grown commercially, you have some that are, take it a little step further where we do inbreeding. So there's a series of inbreeding so that we can get plants that are purebred, and then we will mate these two pure breeding organisms so that we can get plants that are hardy and have really good characteristics. And this term is, the term heterosis or hybrid vigor is used. And that is why people like hybrids, because they have this robustness and the characteristics that they are bred for are conducive to growth in an agricultural system. So they will sometimes be drought tolerant, they can grow in certain soil types, they're pest resistant, and most importantly, they will have high yield. And also, as I said before, uniformity in growth and maturity is key, especially if you are going to do large scale production. Hybrids are great, but trying to use the seeds from hybrids for another generation, it's going to pose some difficulty. So hybrid seeds are considered sterile because sometimes farmers will grow them and they don't get the outcome they expect, but hybrid seeds are not sterile. what is happening when you breed the hybrid with itself, you will get gene combinations that are not like the hybrid. So these gene combinations that exist in the hybrid for robustness and high yield, they will change in their offspring and you will not see that again. So this is very frustrating for farmers because you spent a lot of money to buy these seeds and usually get a lot of them. You plant them out and you're happy with the yield, but the next generation, when you save the seeds, it's not the same. And that is where we have the problem because all the robustness is lost. I'm going to show you why. Now I'm going to talk about here the F1 hybrids that exist, where before we actually make the hybrid, we have to do a series of inbreeding. So we get a plant that has characteristics that we love and we breed it with itself one generation and those will breed with themselves another, the offspring and so on for several generations so that you get uniform characteristics and you get what is called a pure breeding or true breeding plant. Now we know with inbreeding you will have loss of diversity because the gene pool is just the same plant over there's no cross pollination and you can have loss of vigor. But what you gain is uniformity in characteristics. Now I'm going to walk you through this. Now we have an organism in the parental generation, we're going to call that P1, and it has been inbred. So it looks like this, and the genotype is like this. So it's pure breeding, meaning if you look at these two, it got this trait from the father, this trait from the mother, and they're the same. This trait for the second gene from father, this trait, second trait gene from mother. And it's a pure breeding organism, sorry, because both genes are the same. Now we are breeding for two characteristics, stall and drought tolerance. So we breed it with another organism that is pure breeding, and here we have a dwarf and non-drought tolerant plant. So they have a offspring now that is our F1, which is our hybrid, and it's the robust one that we care about. It is drought tolerant and it is stall, right? Now, if we take this organism and we breed it again, we're going to get many different combinations. And the chance of you getting back this organism becomes severely reduced. And that is why farmers have the problems that they have. Because they're getting probably this crop or this one and not the one that they originally wanted. Now, for organic agricultural systems, we do allow hybrids, okay? Hybrids are allowed. And these are examples of crops that are actually organic and they are hybrid. So we have corn here and cucumber. Now we're going to go into, we're coming at DNA technology or genetic engineering, the more controversial of the two methods. Now, genetically modified organisms are organisms that have had their genes altered because of genetic engineering techniques. So what happens here is that genes from completely different organisms are put together, and these genes would never have been put together no matter how long evolution continues. Now, the first gene that was made into, that was incorporated into a genetically modified organism was the gene for insulin. So you would isolate it from human cells, take DNA from bacteria, put that bit of DNA from human cells into the DNA from bacteria. So we have what's called a recombinant plasmid. Now, a new DNA, this is genetically modified genetic material. That material you put into cells, E. coli cells, bacterial cells, and you allow these cells to grow and grow and grow. And because, as I said earlier, the genetic code is the same no matter which organism you are, you will find out that the bacteria here are making human insulin. And it's characterized, it's the same insulin that humans will secrete. Now, how is that done for plants? There are several methods, but two are highlighted here. We can actually use naturally occurring bacteria that have the ability of making plants genetically modified. So this bacterium is able to put foreign genes into plant cells. So what scientists do, they put the gene of interest into the bacteria, this bacterium here, and allow it to grow with plant cells for a few days, and the bacterium will naturally change the plant cells. So if you notice, they are white here, but they are now blue, the nucleus here, because the genes have been transferred from the bacteria to them. Or you can take little bits of gold pellets, and you can coat them with the gene, and you can literally fire them into the plant material. And being fired into the plant material, you will have the plant material being changed. So now it is now a GMO plant. Now you have all of these GMO plants, you have planted them out. How are you going to know that it's genetically modified? And sometimes you do the procedure and not all of them become genetically modified. You have to select for your changed organism, your transformer. So you can use what are called molecular markers, and those are in the other group of technologies that we didn't really go into details. And using these molecular techniques, you can actually detect your gene of interest. And you can do that before the plants are this stage. You can do that when they're very small, so you don't have to waste time and labor planting them out. Now, you can also use what are called selectable marker genes like antibiotic resistance, herbicide resistance, or you can use genes that you can actually see that the plant has been changed. And we have an example here of a detection of genetically modified crops. So, well, not really crops, but soil-based products. You can even detect the gene sometimes in some types of soil-based products of genetically modified plants. So for instance, soy flour here is number 7, and the gene has been detected using molecular techniques. So we know that this exists in this soy-based product. Soy cream, which is 9, it is there as well. Soy milk, which is 11, it has been detected. Now I will share this paper with you if you wish, so that you can actually go and access it later on. Oh, sorry. All right, so the genes that I spoke about that you can actually see are genes that have code for particular characteristics that you can look at as the scientist and know that this organism has been changed. Now, this is a jellyfish called Aquaria victoria, and it exists in the ocean where it is dark, and it actually gives off a green fluorescence to attract mate or ward off predators. But that gene has been taken out and put with your gene of interest. So if it is drought tolerance you want to put into the plant, you will also put this gene for the GFP protein into the plant as well. And here you can see that this plant is showing that it has been transformed. All of it has been transformed. Here we have 2 rice grains, K and I, and you can obviously see that I is the one that has been changed using the genetically modified technique. So if you're a scientist, you would quickly take these seeds and grow them out for production. Now, comparing GMO and hybridized plants, if you notice, the genes that exist in hybridized plants are their own genes. So it's the same genes of the plant species that we have been using and we've been breeding over and over and over to get our hybrids. So there's no gene from foreign, right? Here, for a recombinant plant, a transformed plant, a genetically modified plant, the gene of interest came from outside and it was put into the plant, and by the 2 methods that I showed you. So this plant now is carrying new genes that it didn't have before, and possibly its species never had before. Now, what does our standards here say for GMO? This is the definition of GMO, and this is the same that you will find in our textbooks, or molecular textbooks. So genetically modified organisms are not allowed, neither their derivatives. So derivatives here are defined and we can see them listed here. So feed stores for animals, seeds, vegetative, propagated material are not allowed. The principles of organic agriculture do not allow them because genetically modified organisms interfere with the normal processes that will exist, processes of evolution and gene transfer. That is changed significantly, so we do not allow that in our standards. And in section 4.7 continued, it actually goes into details on the on genetically modified organisms. So they are not allowed, no shape or form. The plants themselves, seeds, germplasm, other germplasm, or their products. They are not allowed in organic systems. Why do we prohibit them? Contamination of the gene pool. They do deny, over time, you look at the social aspect, they deny farmers and consumers the rights, you know, and it depends on how your countries put together their policies. They also are incompatible, as I stated, with our principles of diversity. They possibly may threaten the lives of human beings and organisms, so animals and plants as well. Now, this shows you the different countries of the world that are heavily invested in GMO production. And you can see that the 4 major crops that are genetically modified are soybean, cotton, maize, and canola. And this is the same slide you saw earlier, but these are the top GMOs, right, that exist in our world. All right, guys, so thank you for listening. I hope it was informative. Thanks very much.
Okay, so thank you, Mrs. Bennett Monroe, for your presentation. So are there any questions? Okay, so Michael has a question or a comment, so remember to unmute. And could you keep your comment as brief as possible, please?
Yes. Doesn't this going to pose a problem when it comes to the seed? When you're dealing with the hybrids, you know, we're talking about collecting seeds. And really one of the only best way to collect the seeds is to the open pollinated, because if you get into the hybrid, it's a hit and miss what you're going to get tomorrow when you start dealing with large cultivation issues. And if you could address that issue in regards to the difference between doing the open pollinated and the hybrids, if we're going to be, you know, if the talk is about collecting seeds.
All right, so if you're going to do an organic system, you don't have to follow the standards and grow hybrids. You don't have to do that. You can actually do open pollinated ones. So open pollinated ones will give you more variety. Remember I said that farmers have been doing this for many years, and some farmers in their localized production systems, they do their own hybrids. So it's okay to do those. You don't have to go through the long process of doing the inbreeding, then to generate your own F1 hybrid. That takes a lot of time. And that has happened, that's with hybrid production. What we find now, in not only with hybrid, but in conventional agriculture now, a lot of these new seed productions are taken out of the hands of farmers and put into the hands of seed companies. So you have seed companies that would have the money to do the big investment into F1 hybrids. So you don't have to go that route. And personally, I would not, because it takes a lot of time to generate this robust heterozygote hybrid. So do your own hybridization, where you will find, I like this characteristic, I like the second characteristic, let me breed these 2 organisms, and you will have your own diversity set up in your own organic system. So you will be the ruler of your kingdom, and there's no reliance on these F1 hybrids that possibly will not give you the same combination later on. If you keep to just regular hybridization processes, then you can actually use those seeds that you have for the next generation and generations after that. So you don't have to rely on these. These are just used because they are very robust. So people who have very large systems, so in the US and in Brazil and Canada, where people have large acreages of crops, they tend to want to use these because they can get the uniformity that they want. But you don't have to do that, especially if you're doing a small system. I wouldn't advise somebody to invest in these F1 hybrids. They can go and get other hybrids that are sold, because people do their own hybridization and sell the seeds or share the seeds, and it's okay. And I would recommend doing those sort of seed sharing techniques.
Well, I was more or less, not so much that for us to do our hybrid seeds. What I was more or less speaking about is in saving seeds from the hybrids, and also for the fact that I mean, I understand the timeline. It's like 9 years, 7 to 9 years to hybridize, you know, especially to what you want to do. But it possesses the other problems with Jamaica also has a lot of problem because of the type of humidity and so forth like that. And that is, is disease and various things. And so the reason why we use, you know, the high expensive hybrid seeds here is because we remove ourselves from TMV, we remove ourselves from powdery mildew, we remove ourselves from spotted wilt. You know, we remove ourselves from a lot of things. And on a large commercial level, is, you know, we pay what, 50 cents to $1 US a seed, you know, but at the end of the day, when you're putting out a 40, 50 acre greenhouse, as it is the case here in Canada, you know, you're willing to pay that. For the smaller farm, I understand. But what I'm saying though, is that if there's going to be a seed collection system in Jamaica that is planning to set up, how do you then do that and then balance off the aspect of disease and all these various things so that you avoid the cross contamination between seeds in your seed lots, if you're actually going to be saving seeds? And if you try to do it through the hybrids, the problem is that you don't know what you're going to get tomorrow, because it's a combination, and it's like putting two different people together of two different races. Down the line, two white people could end up having a black kid if they have black in their, you know, and that's how the hybrids work. It may result back into its original. So how do you then balance a seed collection system in Jamaica and at the same time get the benefits of what you need to do for protecting the seeds through diseases and certain things resistant wise? That's what my really question is about.
All right, written into the policy would be room for research. So if you're going to make hybrids that are suited for here, it wouldn't be the farmers that would have that major responsibility. You would have to have research being done. So you have to have scientists and the Ministry of the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries taking on the bulk of that to get hybrids that are suited for us, because it's very, very expensive. So we currently now are using hybrids that are suited for other countries. So we don't have hybrids suited for us. So that would take years of research. So we would have to ensure that we start doing that so that Jamaica can have its own set of hybrids that are suited for here. So farmers will not need to buy hybrids that are suited for temperate countries. So we don't have that because we don't have the framework for that right now. But as I said, in an organic system, you can do your hybrids, not the F1 hybrids that are intensive and very expensive to generate. You don't have to generate those. For now, you can just do your regular hybridization and share those seeds, right? But you would have to take records to ensure that when you're giving these seeds, you will let the person know that there's a possibility that you will get these combinations. But the intensive F1 hybrids, we would have to generate those that are suited for our country. And that's a lot of research. And as you said, many, many years. That answers your question? I hope so.
Okay, Michael, did that answer your question? Okay,
Yes, sorry about that. Yes, I do understand that. So more or less what I wanted to do and a little later on was, this was part of something that I wanted to personally do with our company coming into Jamaica, is actually find out who we could sit down and discuss in community wise, that we could put money towards certain researchers in certain things. For particularly Jamaica, that would make it much cheaper for local farmers to be able to get certain things. So
Okay.
that's something we could talk about later on.
Okay.
Another time.
Okay, all right.
Okay. All right, so thank you very much for that informative presentation. And also just point out, if there are other questions that come to you after the presentation, you can always email us and we'll try to get the answer for you. All right, so it's time for me to introduce our next speaker. Her name is Mrs. Sanil Wilson Graham. She is the Chief Plant Quarantine produce inspector and the head of the plant quarantine and produce inspection branch of the Ministry of Industry, Commerce, Agriculture, and Fisheries. So Mrs. Wilson Graham has a very important role. She is responsible for safeguarding Jamaica from the introduction of pests, and her job also involves making sure that whenever Jamaicans export plants and plant produce, it's of the best quality so that Jamaica has a good standing and there's not a lot of barriers towards the entry of our products into other markets. She has served internationally as well as locally on different boards, and she has a wide background. She has taught different topics at the tertiary level, and she also works to educate future farmers through CAPE and CSEC. Her presentation today is going to be on plant quarantine regulations for organic seeds, importation, and nursery management. All right, so thank you for taking the time out to join us, Mrs. Wilson Graham. Over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Let me also thank JOAM for inviting us and also extend a personal greeting to my colleague persons who I'm very familiar with, including Raymond, Kerry, of course, our sister that just presented as well. So let me also extend my greetings to you all. This morning, I am going to speak on the importation, particularly of planting materials. For the branch, we categorize it as planting materials, and that includes seeds and other forms of planting materials. However, I will focus the presentation on seeds because I think that's where the interest of JOAM perhaps lies. I will do the presentation. I must also say at this time that I'm also supported by a team, Mr. Rowe, who is the senior plant quarantine officer with responsibility for our import system. Then we also have Ms. Latana Richards as well, who has responsibility for the pest risk analysis unit, is also with me this morning. Let me also take the time to say that this year is being celebrated as the International Year of Plant Health. And just want to ask you to join the ministry in recognizing. We realize that there has been several hiccups for this year, but nonetheless, we recognize the importance of plant health to agriculture, of course, and certainly to our economy and our environment in general. The presentation will actually focus on 5 main areas. We'll be looking at what's the mandate, what's the function really of plant quarantine, just a little bit on our legal framework or international framework as well, because we operate on an international agreement. And of course, we will then look at the importation requirements of planting materials, and of course, do a little bit on the regulation of nurseries and clean seed, which is a requirement that we also have, not just under the Act, but also under the new seed policy. All right, just for simplicity, plant quarantine's main function is to regulate the export and import of agricultural, fresh produce, and other regulated articles. The picture that is being shown there would have shown you several of the import and export that comes in and out of the country, or that is exported, as well as that comes into the country. But also it shows what you see there as pallets, which are made from planting material and therefore likely to carry pests. So some of the things that we regulate that may be non-plant related would include, for example, used cars and equipment. Once it is that there's a potential for it to take in a pest into Jamaica, then we have a responsibility to regulate those as well. This function feeds into our greater mandates, which are to ensure that only the highest quality produce are imported into the country and exported as well to our trading partners. And of course, one of the core mandate is to ensure that there's no harmful exotic plant pest that is introduced at the first instance and then obviously become established into our country and causes serious agriculture as well as economic impact to the country. We operate under 4 main legislation: the Plant Quarantine Act of 1993 and its regulation, the Plant Importation and Control Amendment Regulation, which is particularly important for what we'll be talking about as it relates to seed import into Jamaica. We also have a citrus regulation that is we operate as well. And of course, on the export end of what we do, we also operate under the Agricultural Produce Act. And under that act, on the export end, which is not the focus for today, we would also do what you call inspection and certification of areas that are actually packing agricultural or plant and plant products for export to ensure it meets our trading partner requirement. And you may be asking the question, why is it important that it meets our trading partner requirement? That is because as a country, Plant Quarantine being the National Plant Protection Organization for Jamaica, we operate under international agreements. That's our next slide. The international agreements really stems from the WTO, that's the World Trade Organization SPS agreement. Now, SPS means sanitary, phytosanitary agreement. And essentially the agreement does ensure that when it is that you're going to have trade between countries, that trade remains safe. Safe in terms of food safety in general, animal health, and of course, plant health. So the SPS agreement partnered with 3 what we call sister bodies to ensure that there are international standards by which countries who are signatory to the agreement or who would have acceded to the agreement must comply with. In this case, as we deal with plant health, Jamaica is signatory. Well, Jamaica is signatory to all 3 bodies, but what we're focusing on today is really the IPPC, which is International Plant Protection Convention. And so along with 182 other countries, Jamaica is signatory to that body. And that body, like the other bodies that are stated there, the OIE, which is for animals, the Codex, which is for food standard, they set standards that are expected to be abided or to be complied with by countries to ensure that you have trade. Certainly you can surpass the standard, but they set minimum standard by which countries are expected to trade, whether it be animal, food, or in our case, plant products and other regulated articles. Having said that, we're going to now move on to the importation of planting material, again, focusing on seeds. We would have already stated that the branch operate under the Plant Quarantine Act and specifically under the Plant Importation and Amendment Regulation. But in terms of internationally, we would have been regulated under, or we abide by the international standard on phytosanitary measure. And that international standard is referred to as ISPM 38. All right. If you could go a little bit right there, right where you are. So before we go any further, let's just have a basic definition how the international world defines seeds. Seeds are defined as a commodity class that is intended for planting not for consumption or processing. So anything that is referred to as a seed, and this is where it brings into other planting material as well, it is actually intended for planting and therefore is classified by the international body as seeds. The classification can be found in the International Standards for Phytosanitary Measures that's available online. I think to date we may have up to 43 standards, and I am referring now to standard number 5, which gives you the definition of these standards. The other, moving on from there, the other thing that is important is that the ISPMs, again, which are the standards that govern international trade, would have said in order for countries to actually trade plant and planting material, there has to be some categorization. In other words, what they did not want is for persons to be applying a particular requirement for import or export that does not meet the risk level. And so there are about 5 categories that different plants are categorized into. It's not just, it's based on their intended use as well as any processing that may have been done to the plant or the plant part. Seeds is actually categorized under category 4. And this is commodities that have not been processed and their intended use is for planting. But it take a little while to just focus on this particular slide. A little wordy, but it's important that you understand this categorization to basically understand what I'll be saying as I go forward. When a risk assessment, a PRA, referring to as a pest risk assessment, is done, this is necessary to identify the risk related to the commodity first, and in our case, it is seed, and then the pathway. The pathway refers to from which country you're taking the particular commodity. What is the pest status of that commodity? What will be done to that commodity prior to export? How will that commodity be packaged? How will that commodity be exported? And basically, the risk assessment looks at all of that. What will be the intended use in the country of import? How widely it will be distributed? And based on all of that, then you come up with what is called a risk categorization. So examples, propagative material, cuttings, seeds, seed potatoes, planting in vitro, micropropagative planting material, and other plants intended for planting is considered under this category. What is important is what is highlighted there. Of all the other categories, seeds are the highest risk, and that's because of their intended use. Now, what does that mean? Once you plant seed, if it comes with a seed-borne disease, because you cannot necessarily visually detect the pathogen or the microorganism or the pest, in a lot of cases as it relates to seed, then you would have had to plant that out before you're able to identify that a risk exists or that you have imported not just the seed, but you have also imported a pest. What would that require from the importing country? You would have to rogue that field. And so the challenges that presents, the economic costs and all of that, actually is surmised to end up giving seeds one of the highest risk imported plant or planting material. All right, so just to move on, looking at the standard that the international movements of seed, some of the questions that are asked when you're doing the risk assessment again, are the seeds pathway or are pests themselves? And that is if the seed itself could actually be a weed, it could actually be invasive, and in that case, it becomes a pest in and of itself. What is the intended use? What is the potential for a quarantine pest to be introduced or spread on the pest or spread on the seed? Is there any regulated non-quarantine pest to cause an economically unacceptable impact if it's present? And what are the measures that a country would need to actually take in order to protect themselves? Sorry. Again, as I mentioned to you before, seeds are primarily intended for planting or propagation. So the standard says if the seed is intended for field planting, meaning it's not going into a greenhouse or a protected or restricted condition, that seed or that planting material has the highest risk. Of course, the risk goes down if the seed is intended for restricted areas or intended primarily for laboratory testing or any destructive analysis. So these are the measures that the international community recommends to country. The consignment must be inspected, and by that it means the shipment of seeds, right? It must have an inspection and testing for freedom. In other words, your seed must be tested to say it is free of any pests of concern for the importing country. There must be a field inspection conducted. You can also require of the exporting country that the seeds must be from an area free of the pests of concern, or from a production site free, or from a place of production that is free of the pest, or from an area where the pest has low pest prevalence. All right, in other words, the pests occur there, but really not at a high level that may cause a concern. The importing country can also require that the seeds be treated, or that they want to see a systems approach, meaning a particular system that shows that in the production of that seed, the seed was prevented from being infested with particular pests of concern. Certainly as well, you would now also have a post-entry quarantine. So once the seed gets into country, then the country of import would be required to ensure they take those seeds to a laboratory to confirm that they are actually indeed free of pests. Then the most stringent measure is that you can prohibit the importation of the seed if it is that it doesn't meet your requirement. I deliberately ensure that I leave that red notification there. The countries, of course, are asked to ensure that the measures you put in place meets the appropriate level of protection. So you shouldn't go too stringent to protect an industry that you may not have. So there are a lot of persons, for example, a lot of countries that really don't have a big agricultural sector. And so their level of protection must be equivalent. Or they may say to a country may actually take us to WTO to say, but Jamaica, you also have the pests. Why it is that you are requiring that those seeds do not come with that pest. And in that case, we would have to go and defend why it is that we are actually making such a requirement. All right, I've laid for you the international framework and what is required in the international scheme re-seeds. Then we're going to now look at what is the specific requirement for importing seeds in general into Jamaica. The truth be told, let I say it right now, we do not consider organic seed different from the traditional seed. In our risk assessment, we recognize that whether the seed is organic or non-organic, the risk of it carrying pests really does not change. So I'm putting it right out here. I know you may have a question, and so I will avail myself. Again, my team is here for you to question us on that, because when we do our assessment, the risk remains the same. All right. Prior to the international standard being passed in, I think it was 2017, Jamaica had said that all seeds coming in to the country must be treated with insecticide or fungicide or some equivalent treatment. We recognize, however, that we were having some issues with seeds that were being brought into the country, and farmers were actually complaining that seeds from the respective suppliers and distributors were actually not of the particular quality. That's one, but also were potentially carrying in pests. And so we had the issue with seed potato. We had another issue, I think, with the papaya seeds, and we had several issues over the year. And so the branch sat down using the international standard and really tried to see how we could try to balance it. How do we ensure that we protect the country, protect our farmers, protect agriculture, while at the same time trying to ensure that we have safe trade, that we weren't so restrictive to trade that persons could not carry seed. We initially said, look, all seeds must be treated. And I think JOAM would have been one of the bodies, not necessarily as the body, but one of the members would have said, look, this is going to affect organic seeds. And so when we sit, we really looked and said, no, we would not require all seeds to be treated. We would also require a certificate of analysis, meaning you can test that seed as is required by the international standard. And once that seed is tested and found free of the disease, it would not need treatment to enter into Jamaica. We still had some feedback during what we call the consultative period when we implemented, and some of our importers of seeds, perhaps the larger importers, we would have had meetings with them, and they said to us, look, requiring that all seeds be treated with fungicide or insecticide, or that the seeds must have a certificate of analysis saying that it is free, was a little onerous for us. And we want you guys to see whether or not there could be any further consideration. One of the consideration that we gave, and which now reflects our import requirement, is that we said seeds will therefore be categorized. What does that mean? The seeds will be categorized based on their family or group, based on their families, and based on the family they are associated with, the respective treatment will be asked. In other words, we would not ask that all seeds be treated with fungicide if it is that from the family, let's say, of the Cucurbidae, which are the pumpkin and zucchinis and squash, we did not have any concern with a fungus. We really had a concern with an insect. Likewise, if it is that we did not have a concern with insect on, let's say, onions and leeks and etc. from the Liliaceae family, then we would not ask that commodity be treated with an insecticide. And so what we were able to do was to group our import requirement based on, and that's on the next slide, group our import requirement based on the family of seeds that we were seeing coming into the country based on our historical data. Nonetheless, despite this grouping that says that these seeds must be treated, the option of taking the seeds without it being treated remain. However, it must be accompanied with a certificate of analysis. All right, I'm going to also give you another example, the next slide. Seeds from the Solanaceae family that includes potatoes, etc., potatoes, tomatoes, etc., must be certified free of the particular disease, and we name the disease Ralstonia and Clavibacter, as well as the tomato brown rugose virus. Or we said a certificate of analysis, or the seed could actually be treated. So we have given three options. The country can certify free from the pest of concern to Jamaica. They can give us a certificate of analysis to say it is free, or they can actually treat the seed and then send a copy of that treatment done with the import. All right, so that is the end of dealing with what is required for the importation of seeds. I'm going to quickly touch on where we are as it relates to our regulation of nursery and clean seed. I know JOAM had asked. From a recent update, the seed policy has now been approved as a white paper, which really means it is officially now a policy. We are now, therefore, in the implementation stage. So much so that the team in plant quarantine was driven by Mr. Alfred Barrett, not on the platform today, as well as working with the Research and Development Division, which is Dr. Myers Morgan Division, has already started, I think from last year or the year before, the consultation in trying to get the regulations now that would actually inform the seed and nursery certification. Why are we doing this? Because the plant quarantine, my apologies, sorry. The plant quarantine, according to that policy, has a requirement for ensuring the certification of clean seed. Now, this is not just important for seeds coming into the country. It's important for us being able to produce our own seed. We're a net importer of seeds, unfortunately. But also, I don't know how many persons know that we currently do not, cannot export potatoes to US, that's sweet potatoes to the US, primarily because we have a virus complex in our seed potatoes for sweet potato. And as such, that would have barred us from being able to export to that country. So us moving afoot to have a seed and nursery certification program, we would now be able to demonstrate to countries that are importing from Jamaica that our seeds are clean, and or if it is not the seed, but certainly the commodity from that seed is proven to be clean. So as mentioned before, we have started our island-wide stakeholder consultation. We have gone in the 3 counties, Middlesex, Surrey, I think we did it by counties, Middlesex, Surrey, and Cornwall. So the team would have completed that. We now have a draft document. We are now arranging for another sit down so that we can now draft the instructions for those regulations. And once the drafting instructions are completed, then we will now move to have our lawyers with the Chief Parliamentary Council draft the regulation and the standard governing seed and nursery certification. This essentially comes to the end of my presentation. Of course, I want to acknowledge again my team members that are on the platform with me. And just to remind you that this year is the International Year of Plant Health. And we also seek the support of our colleagues from JOAM in ensuring that we maintain plant health, which is important for agriculture, food security, and the economy for Jamaica. Thank you for having me. I hope I was able to clarify any issues you have, and we remain here to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that very informative presentation, Mrs. Wilson Graham. You've provided us with a lot of clarification, because that's a question. Some of the issues that you have covered are confusing to a lot of our members. So is there anyone who has any questions or comments that they'd like to make now? Looking in the chat, and I haven't seen any questions so far.
I was either clear as crystal or clear as
I think Crystal. All right, so what I have a question as it relates to, so I'm an organic farmer and I want to import seeds and I don't know where to start. Is it that you guys could help us? Is there any preferred companies, or is that something that you don't keep track of, like preferred companies that have a good track record of having clean seeds or seeds that they can trace?
Certainly, that's something, Mr. Rowe is here, Mr. Rowe. That's something that quite often we may have to, if we have persons approaching us to say that, well, you know, I have a difficulty with the supplier being able to meet the country's requirement, we will say to them, we can refer you to this company that provides seeds. We certainly can't tell you who they provide seeds to, etc., but we try to provide that guidance. Mr. Rowe, you want to perhaps give a list of those companies that have been able to meet our requirements? All right, I'm not hearing him. I'm not sure what's happening, but certainly Johnny Seeds in the US comes out at us. We are aware too that they do have a line of organic seed. I was actually advised yesterday through my colleague, Dr. Myers Morgan, that the Johnny Seeds, which is have met our requirement. In fact, Johnny Seeds work with the country. They requested extended time to be able to meet our requirement. And I think we can now say that they do meet our requirements, and as far as I was advised, they do have a line of organic seeds. We really don't, unless we're asked to, we really don't liaise with the suppliers. We usually liaise with our counterparts in the other country.
Okay.
Hello, are you hearing me?
Oh, sorry, Mr. Rowe is on, Kerry. He perhaps could give other companies.
All right,
Okay.
so Ms. Wilson would have mentioned Johnny Seeds. In fact, one of the leading teen company in the US, reputable company. There's also Hamsa, Bonanza, Pioneer, and Tropical Seeds that are actually good seed companies that you can actually get seeds from. A lot of our seed companies in Jamaica have been using these companies to get their imports of seeds into Jamaica. All right, and we can
Okay.
actually provide more information if you contact us.
Okay, thanks so much. All right, I have another question in the chat. So is seed saving going to be prohibited? There is a case now where farmers in some countries are being fined for saving seeds. So that sounds a bit controversial. So any opinions, or do you know if Jamaica is going to get to a point where we're going to prohibit seed saving?
All right, I'm not sure, Kerry, if you could have them explain to me what that means, because from the plant quarantine perspective, once we permit the seed to enter and it has entered, it has landed, meet the requirements of the country, we have inspected and we have released the seeds, we do not have any other phytosanitary issues. The only other issue is whether or not after you have planted out that seed, we realize that there's a pest, then we may have to make contact and ask, depending on our assessment, whether or not we're going to contain or row. But perhaps if they could explain a little bit more what is meant by seed saving. I'm not sure if Dr. Myers is here because their division deals with storage of seeds. If she could also perhaps chime in at this time.
So Raymond, could you please just clarify? Perhaps you could turn on your mic and let us know even a little bit about that case.
Kerry,
There was actually an issue. I was trying to find the, yes, Tanzanian farmers are facing prison
okay.
sentences if they continue their traditional seed saving. And I think what has happened is that their seed regulations, okay, it's a whole patenting of and protection of seeds. And so what it says here is that 80% of the seeds are being shared and sold in an informal system. This therefore goes against patent laws. I know one of the one aspect of the new policy is the protection of persons who have patents or seeds. And so that may actually put farmers at risk if they actually share and distribute these seeds in the traditional system where, you plant your corn, the corn is harvested, those seeds can be exchanged. If they're patented, then that may actually put farmers at risk of a jail sentence. So I was just wondering if there is, if in the regulations that are being proposed, if that is something that is potentially possible.
Hello.
I would say, Raymond, very possible in that I know from the planned quarantine, one of the things that we would have been dealing with is what we call Jamaican variety of seeds that are now being sent to different countries. And I know some amount of verbal discussion has been taking place regarding what can be put in place, even with our JIPO, the Jamaica Intellectual Property Organization, in terms of how the ministry. Those are very preliminary discussions, extremely preliminary. And so I am not aware that the regulation would take that into consideration. If it does, nonetheless, I think Dr. Myers Morgan Dr. Myers Morgan division, would actually be responsible because they have storage facility, etc. But from my desk, those are at this time only preliminary discussion. Dr. Morgan?
Hello. Hello, are you hearing me?
She may not be able to. Her
Okay.
mic seems on mute, but we're not audible.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, we are now.
Okay. Yes, I actually didn't leave you. I've been multitasking. Yes, in terms of the policy, the organic policy does speak to that allowance of seed being saved within the organic system. So it depends on the regulations that would be in place. The issue of patented material, then there would be definitely an issue where they would not be able to be saving seeds which are patented unless there are certain allowances made for that, right? So, but within the ambit of the organic policy and seed policy, there is an allowance for certain groups to facilitate the saving of seed within their particular, I guess, organization or so. Say for JOAM, there will have to be some specific regulations that would be in line with that. But saving of seed is being permitted, but of course within the defined regulations. Does that answer the question? Hello?
Yes, it answers
Yes?
it answers the
Okay.
question, but
Yeah.
what I think we have to we have to be very cautious how we move forward to ensure that we don't end up in a situation where we stifle our traditional producers and prevent them from being, well, from carrying out their normal practices, their traditional practices. Because for many farmers, they can't really afford to buy the seeds. So what they do, they exchange the seeds, but there is a possibility that we may get to a point where they end up, the seeds that they're currently trading become patented, and then they can no longer do that, and then they starve.
Well, I mean, that is, I mean, I guess, well, in reality, that has happened in other jurisdictions, but it will have to be a case where JOAM, for example, these are seeds which are, I don't know if you're breeding seeds, breeding varieties for the organic, to have that sort of mechanism within to protect those farmers who are part of your system, right? So the allowances can be made for your group to be able to share that, since this is an allowance that you want to see within your group. Does that make any sense? Hello? Hello?
Yes, I think we'd have to discuss it further though. It's really an issue that really when it gets to that point, I think we have to have some serious discussion on it.
Okay, because there are programs I think in Africa, there are programs where they are facilitating or promoting farmer safe seeds. There are a number of movements that are actually gaining traction in that regard. So it's for us to learn from what they're doing. And I guess with the further discussions, then we can develop a system that is compatible for our context. Okay.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have one more question. So this, I think, is going to be our final question on this topic. So someone would like to know the approximate timeline to get an export license. And since Johnny seeds meet the requirements, do we still need to get certifications from Johnny seeds, or can we just take in their seeds without any issues?
Right. Thanks again for the question. Carrie, they need to specify because they just use the word export just now. An export license is obtained from Trade Board, and an export meaning that you're sending something from Jamaica to another country. I'm not sure if that's what they're making reference to. There's a whole list of things that needs to be done. Well, not a whole list, but certainly you need to have an approved packing house. The plant quarantine will come, inspect, certify your packing house, and then your shipments would be inspected as well to meet the importing country's requirement. Some importing countries give a database that you must check to ensure that you certify against the requirement, and some give a permit and some use both. They use the hybrid method. I suspect though that the person is making reference to import. If they are or not, I perhaps could just take a couple of seconds to explain the import side. For the import side, the first thing to do, you must register with the Government of Jamaica Trade portal. That's called MOA trade.gov.jm. On that trading portal, you can select to import plants, animal, or I think even Ministry of Health also uses that trading portal. Once they register and they have selected that they want to import plant, that registration will be sent to the branch and we approve that registration within 24 hours. If there's a need for the registration to be approved before, you just call into the branch and indicate that and we will get that expedited. That's something that we facilitate once it is that the administrator for the system is available to do it immediately. It requires as well that the person is a Jamaican, and by that we really mean they must have a TRN, all right? Because we can only hold an importer accountable for any breach of our import conditions. We can't hold the exporting country outside of notifying them or prohibiting export from that country. Once you have registered, then you go back to the very same system and you apply, put in your information. Which country are you taking it from? What exactly are you taking? What quantity? Where is it expected to leave? Because you can have the country of origin as well as the country it is leaving from to get to Jamaica. If for whatever reason Jamaica has never imported that commodity, or it's the first time we will be importing from the country that you have interest in, it presents what we call a new pathway for a pest. And so you would have to send in, and that's separate. So if we're regularly importing this particular commodity, like I spoke about with Johnny seeds from the US, you don't have to go through this process that I'm about to tell you. And the risk manager is also online. But if we have never done it before, that's something that you really want to consider in your business plan. Start very early, send something to us, send an email. It will be channeled to the risk assessment unit. They will be in contact with you, ask you to initiate that you want this to be done. They will do a risk assessment, a preliminary one. The preliminary one will tell you if they need to do an advanced one, etc. And they will be in dialogue with you about what is required. Once they have completed that, then they will inform what is the requirement for importing into Jamaica. You apply for your permit, you get your permit. The permit costs $1,500. The permit cost increases if the quantity increase above, I think, 20,000 kg it is, Mr. Rowe. Then it goes to 3,000, and then it goes to 4 or 5. The maximum is 4,500. But for most seeds, it is within the 1,500 based on the weight. Once you get your permit, you send your permit to the exporting country. They will give you a phytosanitary certification. To answer the second part of the question, will you need to do anything? Well, once you contact the supplier, for example, in this case, Johnny Seeds, you have to give them the permit, and the permit will tell them what they need to certify against. Is it a document they need? Is it a treatment? Whatever it is that they need. Once he meets that, he will make contact with his colleague body in that country, a body just like the plant quarantine here. They will do the certification, and then the shipment will come down with a copy of the permit, a copy of any treatment, a copy of the certification. And once it gets to Jamaica, you present your originals and you get that clearance once it meets our requirement. We reserve the right to do visual inspection. We also reserve the right to send a sample to our research and development post-entry quarantine for testing, just to ensure we can confirm. I hope that answered the question.
Also, one last question. So I think that answered the question, but no, one last question. What is the cost of the current cost of the process?
All right, the process that we are responsible for when you're importing is just issuing you with the permit. And as I said, the permit, if the quantity I think is below 10,000 kg, I'm asking Mr. Rowe to make sure to type in the chat to give the exact weight. Below 10,000 kg, I think is actually 1,500 Jamaican dollars. Above 10,000, I think it goes to 3,000 Jamaican dollars. And I think if it goes even beyond that, it goes to 4,500. It stops at 4,500. Once we give you that permit, again, you send that permit, send that permit to your supplier. They will now need to go to the respective bodies in their country to get a phytosanitary certification and or treatment. That cost, we can't tell you. I know in the US for the phytosanitary certification, it's $100 US. On the Jamaican end though, when we are exporting, the cost for our phytosanitary certification is $1,000. Jamaican, 1,000 Jamaican.
Okay.
Yeah, and also, Ms. Wilson, remember that they need to pay the inspection fees.
Thank you.
So the inspection fee for anything between 1 and 10,000 kilogram is $5,000 for the inspection fee. And from anywhere from 10,000 to 25,000, the kilogram, the inspection fee is 8,000 Jamaican dollars. Most seeds will fall within the 1 to 10,000 kilogram category. And so the permit will be 1,500 Jamaican and the inspection will be $5,000. So it would be about $6,500 in total. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rowe. I really forgot that. To put it in context for the team, the $5,000 is when the shipment gets to Jamaica for our officers to go inspect and collect a sample if needed.
Okay. All right, so thank you so much, Mrs. Wilson Graham and your team. You provided us with a lot of information and questions that people have always wanted to have covered. So thank you so much. It was a very interesting and clear presentation. And thanks for the feedback. All right, so we are going, all right, and good to see you again, if it's even over Zoom. So we have had some technical difficulties, so we are running late. So because of that, we are not going to have the final discussion on the contents of the position paper. We're going to ask you, so when you get sent the link to the recordings, we are going to send you a link to the white papers, and then you can email us any comments that you have. But we are going to conclude with a discussion by our chair, by JOAM Chair Deborah Boyle, on the market opportunities for organic produce. So Deborah has been invested in organic agriculture for over 20 years, and she is currently a certified organic farmer, and she has some specialization in turmeric. So we are going to have a presentation from her, and then after that, we'll conclude our webinar.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I had sent some slide pictures over to Raymond, but I'm not sure if he was able to pull it together. So, and it was last minute, so it's not Raymond's responsibility. So I just wanted to just pull the seed conversation together a bit. I mean, we felt at JOAM that this was a really important webinar to conduct because we do have a lot of small growers and a lot of growers, and seeds are always of the utmost importance to them. And all the presentations were really excellent today. I really want to thank everyone for coming forward with their presentations. And, you know, some of the reasons are, you know, in Jamaica, why seeds are so important is for diversity. I think that Jamaican indigenous seeds are being lost a bit from what's happening. Raymond's put up a slide here, and this is not Jamaican turmeric. This is Hawaiian turmeric. And just talking on the marketability, we have been personally shut out of the market for 6 months, not only because of COVID and transportation issues, but we have increased competition around the world on an indigenous product that we grow that we don't necessarily cultivate very much except to squash the head down in the soil. But other countries like Hawaii are cultivating turmeric, which is something that we need to get to here in Jamaica. Our quality has really slipped over the years with the overpicking. And I want to give you an example of prices right now. Organic turmeric is selling from a distributor for over $600 for 30 pounds, over $600. So that means it came from the farmer, was transported up to Canada or the US, and now it's sitting in a distributor's warehouse and is being sold for over $600 for 30 pounds. And then it gets to the retailer, and then an additional markup is put on and sold to the consumer. So we're shut out of the market because our quality is not that great. So the wild cultivation product is going to the East Coast, landing on the East Coast for maybe $80 US for 50 pounds in a mesh bag. In the meantime, we could be getting far more money, you know, a bigger market share and a lot more money for our turmeric production, for example, here in Jamaica. So, I mean, these are all opportunities. And again, turmeric grows wild here, and we need to cultivate more and do a better job and not overpick it like we have with the indigenous Jamaican ginger variety. We can't even compete on the world market with ginger, really. Peru sells a 30-pound certified organic box of ginger, you know, in their peak season for $30 a box. And so we haven't been competitive in that market. But myself, being in this industry since the 80s, knows pretty much every type of product that's sold out there and what we could or could not be doing with it, and what, you know, its marketability and how much we can make and things like that. So again, just going back to the seeds, you know, we're working on diversity, proprietary. I think some people continue to grow seeds that they feel is proprietary and that they want to keep it to themselves because it tastes better, it looks better, it grows better. I think that happens when your seed selection is going on. For example, there's a very large carrot producer in California called Grimway. I mean, that carrot is unbelievable. If you juice that carrot, it's like you're eating whipped cream. It's so sweet. The Brix count on that carrot is quite high. And we talked a lot about looks and seed, but we haven't talked a lot about taste, on what seeds we're bringing into the country and what the taste of that's going to be. And I think that our vegetables, in particular in Jamaica, not our fruits, could use with a better seed selection and a higher Brix count, because you can get some pretty sweet tasting vegetables just like you can with fruit. And that's a higher Brix count, which means your product is more nutritious. So the sweeter it is, they equate that with more nutrition. It's important to have seed stock on the island. If anything, I mean, we just went through COVID and we've seen what's happening there. If things were to get any worse, we need to have some seed stock on island. So it's very, very important that Jamaica take this serious, the government takes this serious and works on the proper type of seed storage for our own indigenous varieties, as well as seed that's being grown by farmers who are producing for seed. Very important. Being a farmer is one thing, and being a farmer for seed stock is another thing. It's a whole art in itself. It's great. We talked about the policy to bring in organic seed. And I think it's important to continue to bring in different seed varieties to introduce into the Jamaican diet. I think we need more leafy greens introduced into our diet. And I think the tourism, tourists would love to see different, products they can buy here, like cherry tomatoes or a sunburst or sun gold. Or I do believe we need to continue to work on different varieties instead of just the same salad tomato you see in the market and the same plummy tomato you see in the market. Again, I think there's seed stock out there where you can get a sweeter variety. A few pictures just flashed on the screen just on Jamaica's diversity that we produce, whether it's plantain, banana, cocoa. These are all important that we save these and have them if we need them to produce here on island. And I know that we have run over time, but I can't stress more that the marketability of organic produce in the world is in the double digits $billion. And what it is in Jamaica is in the single thousands of dollars. I mean, I probably hold the most certified organic land in Jamaica, and it's really wild cultivated turmeric that I've been able to get certified organic and have the certified organic packing house. So that's just such a small amount of product. And we have to continue to push the government of Jamaica to finalize our organic standards and have a policy that makes sense around the world. There's over 100 countries in the world that have governmental certified organic policies. They trade with other countries, and it's easily done because they have policies they all agree on. And it's a known fact that selling certified organic produce has a premium. And it has a premium for various reasons, because you're doing green manures and you're creating composts and you're farming in a different way. It's not just the boom, which is what their Israeli technology they're coming out with, which is a concoction of chemicals. Well, we got the boom of certified organic inputs that we want to bring to farming here in Jamaica, and we know it could be done. And both domestically, I think people want a diet free of chemicals. I can tell you right now, I am doing some distribution on island of fresh produce, and so I buy 1,000 pounds of melons at a time, and I bite into a melon today, and my lips swell up. So I know I'm not allergic to watermelon, but I know I'm allergic to something in that watermelon. And when people are farming out there, they're just talking numbers, a 12, 14, 30, or a 8, 8, 9. I'm not great with the numbers on conventional farming, but I do believe that taste or some residue and certain things do end up in the food. You talked about the DNA and the genes and what's in a seed and what goes into that piece of fruit or vegetable you're producing. And I do believe that I personally would like to eat certified organic instead of what my choices are here right now in Jamaica. So marketability, I think it's only up. Jamaica can only grow in stature in dollars and marketing of organic produce domestically as well as export, because as certain markets dry up, Jamaican product will be enticing in certain markets, and with the right marketability, when we hit some trade shows and we show everyone how dynamic our certified organic program is and the different types of produce we're producing, the sky's the limit. I think we can only grow with organic here in Jamaica. We do have someone on today, Michael Allen, and he's in Canada. He's going to be starting up a very large certified organic greenhouse program here in Jamaica. And I'd like to just give him a couple of minutes to talk about his program to show how meaningful it is and how the sky is the limit when it comes to organic here in Jamaica. Michael, are you there still? I'm not sure if he jumped off. I see him there. Michael? I'll tell you a little bit. I mean, they plan to do a very state-of-the-art certified organic operation of greenhouse as well as field grown product. And that's what we need to see. In the early days in Canada, you had all these conventional farmers, whether it was milk or eggs or chicken, ground crops, fruits, berries, you know, they all dug their heels in and wouldn't do it. But nowadays in Canada, for example, all those conventional companies are producing organically. The conventional milk companies that we had to take to the trade board to allow organic milk to be produced, they're shipping organic milk to China daily by plane. So the organic industry is alive and well, and we just have to get into it. I think that's all I have to add. I'm not sure if there's any questions. I see there's one here that certification is high per lot. Dorian? Certified organic.
I was saying, it was when they were saying, when Raymond asked about the current cost of the process, they only talked about the cost in Jamaican dollars because the cost for certification is high per lot because you buy, they certify the lots, and plus the certification costs for the lots are in US dollars. So it's a lot more than 6,500.
Are you talking about the cost for the seeds coming into the country?
When you order the seeds, when
Yes.
you have to abide by their restrictions, you have to pay for that certification that's required. And it means that on each of, if you have 5 different families, you're going to have 5 different certifications. And you have to pay for each one of those because they certify per lot. So your share of the lot means that the costs are raised for your seeds, plus you have to pay it in US dollars. So it's not 6,500. It's a lot more than that. It's the cost of the seeds plus the certification that's required that you're paying for. It's not a hidden cost. It's very much a cost.
Yes, I do know that organic seeds in general are a lot more expensive. And again, in speaking with Michael, like each one of his seeds costs $1 US. So one seed for a greenhouse, certified organic, is $1. Now he's going to harvest, like after he harvests like a kilo of tomatoes off that vine, he's made his money back. But the initial cost of seed, purchasing organic seed is probably a lot higher than conventional.
It is.
Yes.
It is. It's sometimes as much as 80% higher.
Yes, that's true. That's correct.
And so when we're talking about costs, what sounds reasonable actually is not. And it's very important in our production costs that we look at that, because what you can sell for is predicated on what you can produce for.
Yes, and I would say that our domestic market in trying to sell certified organic is very limited. We don't have a lot of buy-in. There's not a lot of knowledge out there. There hasn't been a lot of marketing about what certified organic is and the benefits. And again, we're kind of very far behind. So if we do start production here, we're going to probably not get the premiums in Jamaica we would for organic, but we would once it's exported.
Okay, Deborah, I see Dr. Lindsay has his hand up.
Yes.
Dr. Lindsay. And well, Michael has his hand up, so maybe Michael could use the opportunity now
Okay.
to.
Yes, Michael, I introduced you a little earlier to just as a large grower who's going to be doing big production in Jamaica. Are you there?
Yes, sorry about that. I was in and out of a few meetings back and forth, so
No problem.
get back here. Yes, you know, one of the biggest things that we need to look at for ourselves as a body in Jamaica, if you're going for the organic, is when I started doing this in British Columbia, the particular products that I was involved in was, you know, it was specialized in heirloom produce, and it wasn't a big market back then. Within years, that market has gone through the roof. And when we hit it off, what we did was we just decided we're just going to do our marketing ourselves, right? We provided the stores, we provided the in-house, we provided everything ourselves and built our clientele. What Jamaica needs to do is that Jamaica needs to look at, and we as a farmer, and this is, we need to look at as a collective body and not individuals all over the place in order for this thing to work, okay? And we need to market our own product, which will then get our return back on what we're doing. And we may take the hit at the very beginning, but when I say take a hit, I don't mean taking a loss, but not getting what you should be getting for your products. Right now for us, with this project that we're planning for Jamaica, we're selling at almost the same price as conventional, even though we're organic. But the purpose of doing that is so that we could get our foothold into the market to people in order to introduce it to them. And then we're going to spend a lot of money on the marketing campaign, which we're going to benefit all the other farmers who can't afford to do it, right? So if my investors are coming in at a certain level, and we put aside a certain amount of money that we're going to say, you know what, this is not just for us. We're going to market organic. We're not marketing land we love. We're marketing organic. We are going to market land we love. Yes, don't get me wrong, but it's to market the organic so that everybody else will benefit from that. Because I think right now in post-COVID, I think anything that we should be promoting is the most healthiest possible products and foods that we possibly can. And I think it will in turn pay for itself. So we need to take advantage of right now. And the JOAM and all you guys, with everybody that's involved with the organic, need to focus on the issue of marketing, because as soon as you could educate people, they will buy your product. And so the cost of your seedings is not going to be an issue.
Thanks, Michael. Dr. Lindsay? Is he there?
One other thing too, sorry, is the issue of your seeds that you're purchasing your seeds is also to get, I mean, I've been working with Latanya on that, and even with, you know, Damon and the whole bit in regards to, is to just find good companies outside of Jamaica, or, you know, and try to get some fairly decent seeds in price wise. And I have no problem, by the way, if anybody was to contact me on that, in helping them find those things. Matter of fact, you could give any of these, anyone in the organic, my emails, Deborah, or I could even post it on here. And, you know, I have a lot of contacts with that sort of stuff here in Canada for seeds and nutritional issues and things like that, which we ourselves will be distributors ourselves that we're bringing also in Jamaica. So if we could get that to a point where our cost is down because we're bringing in everything bulk wise, then it's easy to distribute among everybody, and everybody will have decent seeds, and then they'll be able to grow properly. But expect to pay a little bit more for the seeds, but you will get a better seed and you'll get a better product out of it, and you'll get your money back.
Super. Well, Carrie Ann, do you want to wrap things up then?
Okay, all right, so so someone is asking, sorry, in the chat,
Michael's
Michael, could you please provide contact? So you could email us your contact and we could share, but just from the conversation so far, maybe our next webinar could be on marketing and, you know, different types of markets. So maybe we could have a webinar fleshing out some of the ideas that you just raised, Deborah, because a lot of our farmers, you know, the local market probably is not going to be the most profitable market, especially since the government isn't helping us to establish our premium for organic. So if the seeds are going to be more expensive and the input and the labor input is going to be more at the start, you know, we can't get back the same price that a conventional farmer is going to get. So maybe that could be our next webinar topic. All right, so for everyone here though, if you have any ideas for a topic that you would like us to discuss, you can always email us so that we could investigate it, try and find different speakers and get that set up. But I hope you all will agree with me that our first webinar in this series has been a success. We had all of our presentations. We had excellent presentations. We all learned. We had audience participation. So I'd like to thank all the speakers who have taken time out to give us very excellent, well-researched, easy to understand presentations. I know that it took a lot of time and effort, and we appreciate that a whole lot. So thank you so much for all the time that you have put in. And thank you too to our participants. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to come and spend some time with us. Thank you for your feedback. Thank you for your continual support. And we'll hope to be in contact with you again. So this is me signing off because we've gone a lot over the time that we had set. So thank you so much for your participation. Thank you so much to the presenters, and have a nice day. We'll be sending out the recording soon and the links to the different material and persons that we have cited here. All right, so take care, have a good day. I'm going to sign off now.
Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.